Greetings, my fellow Americans. Greetings, my fellow Americans and others. I am getting ready to conclude my, it's been about 2.5, 3 week trip to the United States of tariffs and tiaras. No, I am concluding my journey, and I come armed to the teeth with observations and insights, some of which even have to do with Zen Buddhism, i.e. the subject of attention and change. In honor of my countrymen, I'm wearing the closest thing I could find in my former closet to a cowboy hat. Not much of a cowboy hat. It's more of an outdated hipster on a first date headgear, but nonetheless, it is what I've got. I remember when I first went to Europe, I was in conversations with Europeans, and I would be trying to signal who I was as a person, and that meant denoting certain political affiliations, certain books I've read, certain movies I've liked, certain music I like, all the signifiers of identity that we think are so distinct here in America. When I went to Europe, basically their attitude was always like, you're a cowboy, you're American, you're a cowboy, all Americans are cowboys. That's the attitude of the Austrians when it comes to America. You're all No, don't tell me you're not a cowboy. You're either an easy rider, free-spirited, chopper, Harley, motorcycle riding Dennis Hopper, easy rider cowboy, or you're a upstanding, law-abiding, gun-slinging, justice-fighting John Wayne conservative cowboy, or you're a cool female black woman Beyonce cowboy, but you are all cowboys in America. I'm a cowboy, I'm a cowpoke. It ain't no joke, I'm a cowpoke. All the citizens eating their chitlins out on the range, they are deranged. So, living abroad has a psychological effect. There's just a lot of space between the continent where I live and the continent where I was born. I get closer and closer to the little town where I was born in Wisconsin, and it's like I'm slipping back into certain childhood outfits and attitudes, certain ways of being, certain internal weathers start arising again as I arrive in this American, Wisconsin, and then microclimate of my particular family. And we all know what this is like. You leave home, you go out into the world, you start your life, you think you're hot shit, you've taken all your meditation classes, you've gone to your shrink, you've listened to 1,001 podcasts on how to change yourself, and you think you're a new person, and then you go home and you annoy everybody for a few days with your new and improved self, and then someone comes up behind you, so to speak, and pokes you a certain way, says a certain something that triggers you, and boom! It's like you're 14 years old again. I believe it was maybe Ram Dass who said, if you think you're enlightened, just try spending the weekend with your family. You'll discover real fast that the world-honored one is not inhabiting your shorts. So when we do Zazen, or a Zen meditation practice. I've talked about this many, many times before. It's a very, very simple practice. You take your seat like I'm doing now, and you hold your body in a certain way, and you commit to being still with your body. And that stillness in the body is, you could say, also manifested in the mind. There's a stillness within, okay? And part of this stillness is noting what's going on inside. So for me, I take my seat when I'm meditating, and there's usually an irritation in my mind. My body by now knows how to sit, and that's really important and special because then I just got the mind to work with. So the body, and this is already incorrect because there's not a separation between the body and the mind. Essentially, Zazen is bringing mind, body, and surroundings together as one, okay? But I'm parsing this because I want to make a point about attention. So my point about attention is, when I'm sitting, I'll note oftentimes that there is activity on the inside. My body is very still, but there's activity on the inside, and oftentimes it's a kind of irritation. I have a very active mind. So I've got like a team of gerbils in there, and they are on their wheels, and they are loud and clanking. And gerbils are weird. They give birth to a litter of little baby gerbils, and then they eat them. That's what I found out this family trip. My brothers and sisters had decided they were going to breed gerbils and sell them to the local pet store, which is right down the street from here. And so they bred the gerbils. First of all, my sisters were like, "Oh my God, is this sexual intercourse?" Because apparently it's not gentle with gerbils. The men are not gentle. So my sisters were like, "I don't like this," but nonetheless, they wanted money from gerbil babies, so they allowed the gerbils to breed, okay? And then the mother took the baby gerbils into her mouth, and my sister and my brother were like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I guess she's lubricating that strange blue-veined, hairless skin on these weird alien-looking fetal gerbil babies." But then the gerbil babies didn't crawl back out of the mouth. So apparently gerbils eat their newborns. The first round, they just eat them. It's like the first draft of my novel when I wrote it. It's like, yeah, just throw the whole thing out and start over again. In any event, what was my point? Oh, the gerbils inside my head. So there's a lot of activity going on in there. And over the years, I've been able to, I'm still learning how to cultivate attention, and it's very subtle, because if you get into a boxing match with your mind, you're never going to be able to hit it. It's like trying to punch your shadow, right? So I just try to sit calmly, and sometimes there are very strong feelings that come up, and they are noted, they are seen, looked at, felt, not manifested, and I try not to go off on tangents, running with thoughts and feeling and emotions, and I try not to tamp them down and tell them I'm meditating. We can't do you right now, No, I'm cosplaying the great Zen monk who doesn't have emotions or annoying thoughts or aggravations or feelings. So you don't repress and you don't indulge, but there's a kind of attention, and one gets better and better at it. I'm avoiding the word mindfulness because I don't like that word, but it's essentially a kind of mindfulness, and they teach this very well. They teach us in the Vipassana tradition, noting like these different sensations that are related to thoughts and emotions and feelings that arise during sitting. And if you do sit for a while, you get to know yourself. You get to know yourself like you would get to know another person that you were spending time with. It's almost like Dogen called it the backward step. You're taking a backward step into yourself. And as though you're spending a weekend away with a new partner, you're getting to know this person. And you begin to see, oh, there's that feeling that's arising again around my mother. Oh, there's that feeling that's beginning to arise again around my father, okay? Or my job, or certain fears around death, or insecurities around one's sex life, or one's body, or the certain rote reactions to certain memories or certain, say, political figures or political ideologies, etc., etc. You get to know yourself a little bit as you sit. You're paying attention to who that character is on the inside. Whereas normally in everyday life, you are that character and you're acting those energies out in the world, right? So in a sense, meditation is catching yourself on the inside, catching awareness, catching, over and over and over, instead of being or manifesting blindly this self energy or this identity. You're seeing it, you're aware of it. And of course, this gets very tricky because who's the you that's aware of it? Then you can become aware of that, and then you become aware of that, and then you become aware of that. And as my mentor once told me, anytime you run into an infinite regression, you're wrong. So it's important to keep that in mind. I'm simply stating that it's very helpful for me, it has been, when I sit down and all these feelings and these emotions begin to arise as I do Zazen. It's been important to me to see them with my mind's eye instead of letting those emotions and feelings run roughshod inside me as I blindly get flung to and fro by the winds of emotion from within as I'm trying to sit for 30 minutes. Know what I'm saying, G? I know you do. So let's try and close this out in one take here, because I don't have a ton of time before this house is crowded again with children and also people. My dad has this saying, whenever he's in a room with a lot of kids, "There's more kids around here than people!" And the older I get, the funnier that statement gets. Now, when I'm around my parents, and when I'm around, let's focus on my parents. My parents are older, and I'm so grateful for every moment I get to spend with them, because I'm aware that this is a limited experience at this point. And as I'm around them, I notice a lot of the times that we do fall into old patterns. And these patterns are like ancient. In terms of my personal life, they're like it's the dawn of time behavioral patterns. And they're very hard, if not impossible, I've found, to break. And I only ever see these energies or these behavioral patterns when I come home and I'm with my parents. And as I stated earlier, being all the way across the ocean in Europe, I'm very, very far away from the guy I am when I'm here. And then when I come over the ocean, this guy is waiting for me. And I become him again. And he becomes me. And we could say, for starters, that a lot of times one's self is one's context. And that can be very disheartening, because you want to be able to take your better self into any context. But that's just not the way it works. For some reason, especially when one is around certain family members that trigger certain things. Here's my point. Let's close this out. I only have 5 more minutes. Let's do this. I have been a guy who spent a lot of his life doing like self-improvement measures. I mean, my high school years were spent listening to self-help tapes on gaining confidence. My college years were spent studying philosophy so that I could become a guy who has some sort of handle on how to be in the world, right? That I moved to a monastery, studied Zen, etc., etc., etc. And yet, still, when I come home, I fall into these same patterns. Now, you may notice something like this as well. You're in a situation and it triggers something in you. And there's a sadness because you don't seem to be able to change. And that was something that was an insight that was delivered to me during my trip home this time. It was like I used that paying attention to what is arising within me that I learned on the meditation cushion I spoke about earlier, I used that during interactions with certain family members. And what I saw was the same old guy feeling the same old things and then acting in the world in the same old way. And that was incredibly painful. And as I was around different family members, I could see myself through their eyes because I'm very close to these family members and I could see what they see. And I thought, oh, not so impressive. Now, oftentimes, especially with self-help addicts like myself, we want to change ourselves. We barely glimpse the ogre or the troll or the demon or the homunculus within that we are, and there's a triggered response that says, I must change, I can't be this. And then we force ourselves robotically in a situation to try and be different. And that lasts about 2 or 3 seconds. Maybe it lasts a day. But sooner or later we get triggered and that old homunculus, demon, monster, ogre self manifests again. This kind of has been, I've noticed this to be the pattern sometimes in my life. Here's my point. What was way more helpful and interesting this time was to keep bringing attention to what was arising in a moment where I was emotionally uncomfortable. Okay, so I'm involved in an interaction with a family member. Said family member does something very irritating and I don't want to have the response that I'm having, and I don't want to have that irritation cause me to behave a certain way. Thus, we continue this pattern over and over and over. Usually in the distant past, and even somewhat recent past, my response has always been to try and change myself, change my behavior, change how I feel. But this time, it's not passive, it's subtle and gentle. Again and again and again, practicing in these real life moments, practicing Zen or mindfulness, practicing present moment awareness or sati, taking the attention, taking Dogen's backward step and seeing that unpleasant feeling. And the really unpleasant thing is that that feeling is coming from me so that it feels like I am that feeling. But bringing attention again and again and again and again and again. All right? So it's not easy. It's uncomfortable to continue to be aware of how bad you feel. And I don't mean, I'm not torturing myself, I'm practicing Zen. It's not passive, it's not inactive, it's just full attention on what is being felt inside me, seeing it, and then letting it go. Seeing it, and then letting it go. Seeing it, and then letting it go. It's becoming familiar with it, getting to know it, getting to know yourself, getting to know this really uncomfortable part of yourself that you've always had and have never seemed to be able to change. It's like having a kind of infinite strength. It takes a great deal of strength to stand in one spot as you're hit face first with a tornado of difficult feelings and emotions. But so it's not passive. Like mostly what happens is we get blown off of our center and we get blown all around by these tornadoes, right? But staying, noting, and it's very painful, staying and noting. And what I've found over the course of a 3-week period in this case, the problem begins to move on its own. So attention is powerful. Attention is a kind of doing. When one pays notes and sees and pays attention to that difficult energy on the inside instead of acting it out, or instead of trying to abruptly change one's behavior or change how one feels, but paying attention to it. It's really, really powerful, and it begins to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So you have a day where it's really difficult, where you're practicing in real time with these emotions and energies and old habit patterns, behavior patterns, as they arise with your interactions with a family member or a loved one. And then maybe the next day you note a different energy inside you when the same issue comes up with the same family member. Something's changed. Something's shifted. It wasn't because you applied some behavioral technique you learned on a podcast or through some self-help influencer in order to change your insides. You didn't do anything. You just held your center of gravity, stayed in your immovable spot, like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, as he was tempted by the beautiful demons and by the scary demons, right? Held his ass on the immovable spot under the Bodhi tree and paid attention to what's going on inside. I'm losing myself here in the metaphor. And the inside situation begins to shift of its own accord. Does it shift in the way you want it to? You thought you needed it to? Not necessarily, but the feeling is different. Maybe there's a little bit more spaciousness, a little bit more breathing room to exercise different options as you engage with the family member. Maybe you don't feel triggered into just one kind of response over and over and over. So, the moral of today's video is, let's tell the story about Ikkyu. Ikkyu, the great dirty Zen poet. This guy was dirty. He had a poem that just went like this. Her mouth plays with my blank like a cloud plays with the sky. That's a great one. Anyways, my point is, Ikkyu was asked to describe all of Zen practice in 3 words. Just 3 words. You can't use any more. And Ikkyu said, sure. Attention, attention, attention. Touch what's happening on the inside with attention, with seeing. As when you see your partner and you listen and you truly hear them. Awareness, sati, present moment awareness. And then the situation inside begins to move and change on its own. And even if it doesn't, then you touch that situation, the unmoving situation, with attention. Because actually it never seems to change when you're touching it with attention, right? You're always, that's the difficult part, is you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm still acting like this. I'm still feeling this. I don't want this. And you try and make it different. And it doesn't change. This is the key. Bring your attention back to the unchanged situation. Back again, back again, back again. Humbly, with patience and strength. Again and again and again. The taking Dogen's backwards step. This is how you practice in the real world. In emotionally uncomfortable or intense situations wherein you seem to be manifesting the same old BS as on the inside as the person on the outside seems to be manifesting their same old BS. Attention, attention, attention. Thank you for paying attention to this video. If you'd like to support this channel, which you don't have to do, but doggone it, am I grateful when you does. You can go here to patreon.com/showsonjackcarpenter. That's patreon.com/showsonjackcarpenter. Remember those commercials from the 80s? That's 1-800-ambulance chaser. That's right. Call 1-800... Patreon.com/showsonjackcarpenter. You can also support this channel through a PayPal link that is in the video description below, but I offer these videos for free, and I'm honored and grateful to be able to do so. Friends, I'm going to be heading back to Europe soon. America, there's a lot going on, and nobody knows what's going on. Pay attention. It's going to get interesting. It's already interesting. I like this video, so that probably means it sucks.